The title of my speech this morning, Improving Parent-Child Interactions, Contingency Contracting for Families. I'd like to share with you some parent materials, family and child use materials that were developed and researched to help families learn about and apply a particular tool, behavior change intervention, derived from applied behavior analysis. That is behavioral contracting, often also called contingency contracting. I'm going to share a number of examples with you, and really the story of a family that started to use contracting, and in doing so became very, very skillful in using this particular behavior change strategy to improve everyone getting along better together. I do have a co-author for this presentation. Her name is Jill C. Dartig, and Jill has put up with me as a husband for 43 years. We met in graduate school, and while Jill and I were in graduate school, we had an opportunity to help develop a preschool program for children with autism, and also there were children enrolled with very severe emotional and behavior disorders. It was funded by the state of Massachusetts in the early 1970s. And at that time, even in the United States, the notion and use of the label, the description autism, was just beginning, and it was quite rare. So there were some of the children in our program who quite clearly would be identified as being on the autism spectrum today, but were not then. But all of the children were exhibiting behavior problems in the home. At school, the children were ages 3 years to 8 years. So this school, Project Change. And some of the parents lived in poverty. Some of the parents were ordered by the courts, by judges, to have their children enrolled in this program because the behavior problems were so severe that if things did not get better, the parents, the family, was at risk to lose custody of their child. I had the very fancy title of head teacher. Well, there were two teachers. We flipped a coin. Who gets? And Jill was the parent trainer. A key feature of this project was recognizing the critical importance, obviously, of parents and trying to help parents and families arrange a better life for themselves and their children. So in school, it was a half-day preschool, Monday to Friday in the morning for about 3.5 hours. All of the parents attended a small group one evening a week parent education session that Jill ran, in which she taught them basic things about applied behavior analysis, how important it is to reward and reinforce and attend positively to our children's good behavior, the desirable things that we'd like to help them learn to do more often, to do our best to ignore and not give attention and reinforcement for challenging and problem behaviors, to learn how to specify things that we want to change. And yes, these parents took data. They counted and they bring and they'd share with Jill how things are going. The parents also once per week came to the school to observe the things that we were doing with the teachers and assistant teachers with their children. Jill made one home visit each week to demonstrate and model and role play with the parents the strategies that they were learning about. Parents were highly motivated to help their children. Most of them were quite successful in making big improvements in child behavior at home. And one of the particular techniques that most of the parents had good success with was contingency contracting. And Jill was very happy about those results, but at the same time, she was a bit discouraged in the realization that the vast majority of parents with children with and without special needs, we get no formal training and education. You have to take a class and be tested to drive an automobile, but you can just have kids and good luck, do the best you can. And Jill was wondering, would it be possible to develop some materials that parents and families could use themselves, families that don't have access to consultation and support by either other parents or professionals and practitioners and so forth. And she thought, would it be possible to develop a children's book, a story of a family, and to see if parents could use that to change their children's behavior? So this idea of Jill's eventually led, 3 PhD dissertations were done in the research and development of this system, and it resulted in a book called Sign Here, a contracting book for children and their parents. It describes a pretty typical family of 3. Both mom and dad worked full-time jobs. Dad worked all night in a factory. Mom worked during the day. 14-year-old girl Lynn, 10-year-old boy Jeffrey, little Pamela, 3 years old. And lots of examples of what we did our best to do from our experiences in working with families, taking those real experiences of what families had shown us and taught us and told us, and put them into this story. And like yesterday, here is a URL and a QR code. All of the slides I'm going to share with you this morning are available if you would like access to them themselves. And that is on there. So there it is. Sign Here, a contracting book for children. And it's written at about the 4th grade level. So some children are able to read it with mom and dad. Younger children or older children who don't have those reading skills would sit and go through it with mom and dad. So sit back, relax, and I'm going to read to you a children's story. Chapter 1, A Short Flight. The 2 boys bounded through the house. They threw open the door to Jeff's bedroom and flopped on the floor. "Wow, we must have just made a world record," Perry said, trying to catch his breath. "That's the most I've ever run without stopping once," Jeff agreed. "Come on, don't you remember why we ran all the way?" Okay, said Perry. "Here it is. Can I hold it?" "Yeah, sure, cool." Jeff's friend Perry had recently gotten an airplane that you could fly on a string and go around and around. And the kids got outside, and Jeffrey loved airplanes, and they started flying the airplane. Right outside Dad's window, where he's trying to sleep, because remember, he works at night. So before long, the window comes up. "You boys be quiet out there. How many times? Perry, you better go home. Jeff, come on inside." "I'm sorry, Dad." "Sorry's not good enough, Jeff. This must be the 3rd or 4th time in the last 2 weeks you've woken me up." "I know, Dad. I'll try to do better." He said, "I wish I didn't have to work at night, but I've got to get my sleep. So we've got to do better with this." "I'm sorry, Dad. I'll try to do better. I promise." Jeff goes into the kitchen, and right about that time, Mom comes home with little Pamela from the daycare. And she's been shopping, and Pamela, Jeffrey loves his little sister, and he starts chasing her around the kitchen. And Lynn, 14-year-old Lynn, she's supposed to help the family start to get supper ready. She's on the phone talking to her friends. The dog, Rags, he's not been fed yet. Mom says, Jeffrey, stop chasing Pamela around the house. Dad comes in at the same time. Oh, and he woke me up again. Everybody's kind of going at one another. Just like most of our families, right? Jeffrey, he picks up Rags, he takes the recycling outside, and he talks to the dog and talks to himself, and he says, when it's like this at home, I almost feel like I was someplace else, even at school. But he thought of all the good times his family has together, and he knows they love one another, but he was just wondering, why can't we get along better? Chapter 2, the meeting. So during dinner that night, the disagreements and the arguments continued. You're doing this, you're not doing this. Why do I have to remind you to do this? And finally, Mrs. Gale and Mom, she slams the table. She says, that's it. We have to stop. Everybody be quiet. Let's just finish dinner. And afterwards, we're going to sit down and have a meeting and try to work this out. And they do. But before they can get started, little Pamela, she had learned a really good way to get her parents and her siblings' attention was to stick her hand in the fishbowl or to drop her building blocks in the fishbowl. Or maybe she would pull Rags the dog, pull his tail or pull his ear. So Rags is always kind of wondering who's next. So they're starting to get the meeting going, but they come and yell at Pamela and stop that. So they're going back and forth, and each one is again saying, well, how can we change things? And Lynn, the 14-year-old, she says, now you may think this is crazy, but here's an idea maybe we could try. This is something we do at school, and it's called contingency contracts. And our English teacher, Mrs. Schaefer, she has us choose different rewards we'd like to work towards, and then we identify the tasks that we're going to do, achieving different homework assignments or projects or activities. And it's fun, and it helps us stay focused, and we do better. And after some going back and forth about whether we should try this or not, Mom and Dad essentially said, well, we're at the point we're willing to try anything if it could make things better around here. So Lynn explains kind of how it works. You have the task side of the contract, you have the reward side of the contract, and then she says, but there's something really special that makes it work, and that's the official seal. It's not a real family contract without an official seal. And Jeffrey, he liked to draw, and so he was excited about that. And that evening, he spent coming up with some different symbols that might go on the Galen family's contracts. The next morning, before they go to school, and where Jeffrey says, come on, everybody, I want to show you the seal I came up with our contracts. And they come into Jeffrey's room, and he holds it up, and little Pamela sees a jar of orange paint. And she thinks it's orange juice, and she runs over to orange, and she knocks it over, spills it on the floor. We've got another mess to clean up. And at that point, Jeffrey's dad and mom, they're looking at his room, and they're saying, oh my goodness, your room is a mess. We'll help you clean up the paint, but then you better get to school. And Jeff says, well, I know, could that be my first contract? Why not? Let's try it. Lynn gets a piece of paper, and they write task. Well, clean up the bedroom. What could be the reward, Jeff says. And Jeff's father says, well, we like to do special things together. How about this? You clean up your room every school day during the week, and on Saturday, you and I will spend 2 or 3 hours together, just us. We'll do something special, go to the park, play sports. And Jeffrey says, oh, that's cool, Dad. I'm really excited about that. And he's got his first contract. He runs to school thinking, things are really going to get better now. Well, chapter 4 is called Loopholes. Jeffrey comes home from school, and he says, I've got my contract. I'm going to clean my room. He cleans it all up. And after dinner, after supper, he calls Mom and Dad in. He says, Dad, come and see my room. I want you to see if I pass my contract and I make my contract. And his room is really quite beautiful. But you might notice on his desk, it's still a real mess. And Jeffrey says, Dad says, I'm sorry, son, you didn't make your contract. Look at your desk. It's just a mess. But Dad, that's my special area. I didn't know I had to clean that up. Everything's much better. And they're kind of going back and forth, and this sounds like this could be another potentially unhappy disagreement and situation. And Lynn hears that, and she comes in to the rescue, and she said, oh, Dad and Jeffrey, here's this book the teacher shared about contracts, the ones we use at school. And it says how important it is to specify exactly what it means to do the task. We had the same problem with that at school with our initial contracts. And Jeff's dad said, all right, we'll try one more time. And Lynn said, here's a special form where you can put all of the information that makes a contract more likely to work. So on the task, who's going to do the task? What is the name of the task? Clean the bedroom. When? Well, every day, and Dad will check Jeff's room each night after dinner. Here's the critical part that wasn't there at all. How well? Well, I'm going to pick up all clothes off the floor, bed, desk, and chair. I'm going to put all the toys, models, and painting things on shelves. Clear off desktop. Make the bed. And that's a lot. And then they kind of agreed, you know what, Jeff? If you do that 4 days a week, it's fine. You could miss 1 day a week and still get your reward. But if we're going to specify the task, it's equally important to specify the reward. So now it's clearly on Saturday. It's going to be at least 2 hours. It's just Jeff and Dad in Jeff's choice of a variety of activities. So the next day, Jeffrey comes home from school. He looks at his new contract, do number 1, do number 2, do number 3, and then he goes, I wonder if this contract really means what it says. So he cleans up the room, meets, he thinks all the definitions in the contract. They go have dinner. Afterwards, he brings the whole family in. Look at my room. Did I make my contract? And of course, Dad said, are you kidding me, son? Your pants are on the window. Your socks are hanging from the plane from the ceiling. But Dad, I made my bed. I cleaned my desk. I did the floor. And eventually, Dad got it. Okay, you got me. So what they did is they revised the contract. So when we make a mistake starting off, we didn't specify the task well enough, or we left something out, or we put too much in, let's change it. Just because the idea that we came up initially seemed like a good way to start and change the behavior and make it motivating and fun, maybe we need to change it. So they added, all clothes must be put away in drawers or hung up on closet. And just like a real contract, Jeffrey initialed it and Dad initialed it. And chapter 5 is about Lynn. Of course, she's helping everybody else develop contracts to change their behavior. But what Lynn does when she gets home, she loves chatting on the phone with her friends, but she does it in the place of helping with some chores and getting dinner started. So Lynn's mom made a contract, help prepare supper each school night, and as a result of that, her reward would be nobody's going to bother you when you talk to your friends. You'll have complete privacy for 30 minutes, a half an hour after dinner, as long as you helped beforehand. And that contract was right off the bat, pretty successful. Mom comes home the next night, and Lynn's got chicken frying in the pan. And afterwards, the family is watching a nature show on TV. Pamela's playing nicely with her blocks, and Lynn's on the phone with her friends. After a while, they realize, you know what? It's almost an hour. She's still in there on the phone. Pamela, Lynn, are you taking advantage of the contract? And Lynn says, I'm sorry, I just forgot. And rather than accusing her or blaming her, saying, forget this contract, we can't trust you, we thought we could, you took advantage. Jeff said, I know how we could solve this problem. Just use the kitchen timer, Lynn, some self-management. When you go in to start your call, set it for 30 minutes, and when it rings, you know it's time to stop. And everybody thought that was cool, and Jeff said, while we're here, let's make some popcorn, and we can all go back and continue watching the show. And while that was happening, Pamela hadn't been getting any attention for a while, and she's back to, bombing the fish. And I don't know if you can see Rags the dog now. He's hiding behind a cupboard over there. He's getting out of Pamela's way. And so everybody's running, and Mom and Dad say, this is just too difficult. There's too much going on. We're going to have to give the fish away. We're going to have to find somebody else to take care of the dog. You can imagine this scene, Lynn's crying, and they're all going, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And Jeff says, well, why don't we have a contract with Pamela? Jeffrey, contracts are made in words. Pamela's a little baby. She doesn't read. How could she do a contract? And Jeff says, well, who said contracts have to be written in words? Why don't we use pictures to symbolize the task and the reward? So they got out some old magazines. They found a dog food commercial that found, a beautiful little puppy and some children playing nicely with it, and they stuck that on there. Jeff drew a happy fish in a bowl. And then Pamela comes over. She grabs him, read me story. Right then, she indicated by her behavior what would be a great reward. She loved when her parents and her brother or sister read her stories. And they loved to read stories with her. But it's a busy family, busy life, and they often wouldn't get to do that and didn't do it on an everyday basis. So they cut out a picture of a children's book, or one of her favorites. They put it on the right side of the paper, wrote contract at the top, said, Pamela, there's your contract. And she's all happy about that. She comes home the next day. Oh, and the contract was, you get home, there's about an hour when you get home with Mom from daycare, about 1 hour before family dinner. Afterwards, there's about 1 more hour before it's her bedtime. If you could play nicely with your toys or rags make it to dinner and then make it to bedtime, we'll make sure a special story's read to you, your choice of stories, before you go to bed. The next day she comes home, she immediately read, and then they tape the contract right on the fish bowl, thinking she always goes there, let's remind her. She comes home, she runs to the fish bowl, everybody's holding their breath. She goes, contract. They go, phew. So Pamela made it. She was nice. She was good till dinner. After dinner, she's creeping a little closer. I went too far. A little closer. And everybody's kind of looking, oh no, what's going to, and of course she lets out a yelp, sticks her hand into the fishbowl, everybody comes running. That's it. So it looks like contracting's not going to work, but maybe not. Maybe what we did there, we expected too big of a task. We expected too much behavior change. A whole hour before dinner, a whole hour after is just too much, too long for Pamela with her current level of behavior and skills. So they simply cut the task in half. Said, Pamela, you make it to dinner. You already showed us you can do that. While someone's setting the table, one of us will read a story to you. Then after dinner till bedtime, you get another story. And things were a whole lot better after that. So my favorite chapter is number 7. Families tried all these different contracts. They stumbled a little bit initially, made very common mistakes that we do as teachers, as practitioners as well, in coming up with contingencies of a reward or a reinforcer for a behavior. Maybe we don't specify the behavior well enough. Maybe we expect too much, so forth. So the family had gotten into a habit of having a weekly meeting to just talk about how things are going, how our contract's going. And mom and dad they're praising the kids. You know, Jeff, you haven't woken me up, and hey, your bedroom's clean. Lynn, it's wonderful how you're helping out, and everything's just great. The kid says, oh, we really appreciate that. But there's one thing we're concerned about, Mom and Dad. They look and they said, you know, even though we're doing all the things on our contracts, you keep nagging us. You keep saying, Jeff, remember to clean your bedroom. Lynn, have you started dinner yet? And they're saying, well, that's a behavior that the parents had learned. And they were used to doing that. So even though the contracts were helping, the parents were still kind of over-prompting and nagging the children to do it. So Jeff and Lynn proposed a contract where the task is Mom and Dad, don't remind us to do stuff on our contracts. The reward is you can go out into a movie or a restaurant or anything you might like. We'll babysit for Pamela. We could make dinner and so forth. But now the children, they were becoming very skilled applied behavior analysts. They knew it'd be impossible for mom and dad to go a whole week without nagging them. So they said, okay, you could have a total of 2 nags, and we'll mark them on the little record there. We're going to hang the contract on the refrigerator in the kitchen to remind you, Mom and Dad, about a good behavior we're expecting. And then they slipped up a little bit, but eventually made it. Jeff and Lynn do a contract together. Jeff does a self-contract. He wants to do better in arithmetic. He's pretty good at school, but his math grade is not very well. And so he sets up a contract where he signs both clauses. He said, if I will study for 1 hour at night, my math, then I can watch as much TV as I want before bedtime. Mom and Dad said, oh, that's great. We're very proud of you, son, wanting to do this. And we'll even have a second contract. If you increase your grade on your report card to a B, that was Jeff's goal, we're going to have a special surprise for you. A bonus contract, they did. Well, Jeff was doing his best, spending an hour with his arithmetic book and his assignments, but his grades weren't getting any better. And he just thinks, maybe I'm not smart enough to do this. Am I just wasting my time? And with this contract, they realized they had chosen the wrong behavior. It's not spending time sitting at a desk with a math book, because what are we going to do? We're going to sharpen my pencil, look out the window. The chair's uncomfortable. Let me get a better pillow. I have some nice music. You look back at the problem. You look at the clock. Oh, 50 more minutes to go. You spend an hour studying, but it doesn't specify particular engagement with problems. So they changed the contract. Did I have it up there already? Yes, I did. They changed the task to solving 15 problems each night. And then you can watch as much TV as you want. Mom and Dad will help you with hard ones or any questions you have. But now, I don't care if my pencil's sharp or not. Turn the music off. I want to concentrate, because as soon as I get 15 problems correctly solved, I've met my contract. I can watch some TV. Now he may finish in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but he's going to do the work. Well, of course, you know where this has to go. He dreams about his special surprise. The last chapter is called What's Cooking? It starts with the children having a contract between one another. That when they were making dinner, when the parents met their contract, making a special dinner for mom and dad, Jeffrey asked his sister, could you teach me about cooking? This looks fun. And she says, well, you know, it's not so easy. It's like science. There's a lot of chemistry. I don't know, Jeff, if you could. Well, she was working on a project in her bedroom. She had gotten some old furniture and wanted to refinish it and paint it. And they basically made an agreement together that when Lynn would give Jeff a cooking lesson, he'd spend time helping her with refinishing her furniture. And then we're on the last chapter where Jeff is going to come home, see about his report card, and it's a wonderful, happy ending. What's his special surprise? Dad takes him to the park. He opens up the trunk, and of course it's an airplane, which Jeff loves. Happy ending to the story. But as with television, there's more. So there's the story and the system for developing contracts, and this slide just describes briefly the PhD dissertations that were done to help Jill and I develop this. Why am I telling you about a book that was published 40-some years ago? Well, first of all, the principle, the behavioral tactic of contingency contracting is as viable today as it was then, even much more so. We now know more about how to develop behavioral contracts to make them even more likely to be successful. This slide, and again, you can access all of these slides if you'd like to follow up on some of this research, shows just some of the peer-reviewed research that's been done using contracts in home and school with children and learners with autism and other disabilities. The other reason that I'm sharing this story with you is that last year, Sign Here was translated into the Turkish language. And I absolutely want to acknowledge and thank our good colleague, Benjamin Birken. Benjamin is the person who I met at an ABA conference. He was talking about the work he was doing in Turkey, materials they were developing for parents, sending Sign Here, and he made sure this got done. So thank you. Thank you so much, Birken. So the back of the book after the story is something called the Do-It-Yourself Contracting Kit. It's information for parents, for families. Now, if the story has gotten you a little interested and you might want to try to do contracts yourself, it takes a family through how you might hold a family meeting, choose tasks, choose rewards, write the contract, and then suggest some rules to make it more likely your contracts will be successful. And there's examples such as this one on how important it is to talk about specific behaviors that are being done or not done. So rather than say, you know, Marcia, you're lazy. What do you mean, Mom and Dad? We want to say, well, Marcia leaves her coat on the floor after school. Fran doesn't cooperate. What do you mean? Well, do you mean, oh, she doesn't water the plants or feed the pet? Child says, Dad's mean to me. What's that mean? Well, Dad doesn't let me use his computer or his tools or something like that. There's a whole lot of examples of potential tasks that other families have used. There's also lots and lots of examples of different rewards that families have used in contracts. So a family can informally themselves had a meeting, discuss these things, and come up with contracts, and often be quite successful. But the research taught us that most of us, most families, it works better if we have a systematic process to follow. And what we learned in this system was that everybody completes 3 lists, list A, B, and C. In list A, parents complete this, all the children complete it. A child who's too young or a child who doesn't write, somebody else completes it for them. But on the left side, it's things I do now, behaviors, because we always want to identify positive things. What do I do now to help the family? But on the right side, what could I do to be a better family member, to be more successful, to make things happier around the house? So the one on the left was completed by a 14-year-old girl, the one on the right by her mother. Then everyone gets a copy of List B. And you write your name at the top. Then you write your name, things I could do to help the family, other ways You write your name, could be. But then you don't complete that list. Those get passed around the table. So if I'm the dad, I've got dad, and mom's going to fill out my list, the children are going to fill out my list, I'm going to fill out the kids' list. And we always ask everybody, write at least one positive thing, because that gives us an opportunity to recognize, sometimes we think everything's terrible here. It is not. There's a lot of wonderful things mom's doing, dad's doing, the kids are doing. And then, right on the right side, things that could be better. It's interesting that the children almost always know the behaviors they should change, and the parents will, and the kids will write themselves, all right, I should clean up my room or not wake up dad, and so forth. List C, you could predict what that is. Write down some activities and things and special treats that you think you'd like to work for as a reward. So there's a teenage girl, there's a list made by a dad. I kind of like number 5. Dad said, a great reward for me would be sitting in my chair with nobody bothering me. If I could just earn some peace and quiet sometimes, that could be a good reward. And then there's some tips on how the family can use these lists to choose a task, the critical importance of being very specific. Get ready for bed. What do we mean by that? Well, in this case, we mean the child should have hands and face washed, teeth brushed, pajamas on, clothes in closet or drawers. A contract for a mother or a father that is the task. I want to pay more attention to my son, or in this case, daughter. Well, what do we really mean by that? Here could be task specifics. I'm going to ask her about school day or homework. I'm going to ask her opinion about something. I'm going to make sure I praise her for something she did well or is doing. I want to ask her to do an activity. And then you might, for some tasks, even for readers, sometimes photographs could really make it clear what we mean by doing this task. So a clean bedroom. We need to specify when or how often the task must be done. Getting ready for bed by this time on school nights, by another time by 2:30. Pay more attention to my daughter. Do 2 of the following 4 at least once a day. Okay? Choosing a reward, it needs to be not too little, not too much. That's a fair reward, and there's a number of examples in the book. Then there are blank contract forms that have the task side, the reward side, who, what, when, how well, who, what, when, how much, in terms of who's presenting the reward. And again, in the Turkish version, language version, all of these things are in the Turkish language. Another example to remind us we can create contracts with pictures. There's a description in the text of why it's important to follow these rules. There's some suggestions, there's some responses to about a dozen commonly asked questions. Why should kids get rewards for doing what they're supposed to do? And what if my son or daughter refuses to sign a contract? And so forth. The book now has been translated into 6 other languages. And Jill and I are very excited. Later this year, it will be published in Japanese as a comic. There's a style of comic books in Japan called manga. And a well-known manga author and illustrator is working on that. And they're going to have online a whole variety of the contract models. There again is the QR code and the URL if you'd like to access these materials and take a look at them at your leisure. I'd welcome you to do so, and I thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Birinci sual. Kontraktların daha effektiv olması üçün məktəb və evdə istifadəsi önəmlidirmi və bunun üçün nələr etmək lazımdır?
Probably the first thing to ensure that the contract has the best chance of being effective is the interest and buy-in for both people. If it's a contract between a parent and a child, between a teacher and a student. I'm sorry. For the contract to have the best chance of effectiveness from the beginning, it's important that both people, the parent and the child, the teacher and the student, see it as a positive thing. We're unlikely to be effective if we tell our child, I really don't like the way you've been behaving, you don't clean up your room, here's a piece of paper, it tells everything you need to do to clean your room, and I've decided you're going to get this for it, sign here. When we approach it that way, we're likely to get, at best, well, maybe I'll sign it, but I'm not going to do it. Or just forget that. I don't like this whole idea of contracts. So if we can, though, sit down together and try to determine mutual agreement on recognizing both me as the parent or teacher, you're saying, I'll change my behavior as well. We can both agree we've been struggling with this particular area of our relationship. How can I help you as a parent? And the child might say, well, I'd like to have a contract with you that's excellent, let's do that. And you control the reward, I'll try to change my behavior. Another possible way to go, and there's examples of these in that Sign Here book for families, is to let the child do his or her own contract. Well, you don't like the idea of me being in control of all of this, and you're becoming more and more mature and trustworthy and independent. Let's sit down and here's the task. You identify what the reward is, and you self-deliver the reward for completing the task. And then you say, well, what if the child just cheats? Well, then we try again and we revise the contract and go from there. But the point is, we don't start by saying, I have this idea, it's called contracting. Here's a form, let's fill it out and do it.
Thank you. And ikinci sualımız İngilizce'de. Second question is in English. Is there any specific activities that parents, friends can play or share their time lovely with their specific children or peers?
Are there special activities?
Yeah, is there any special activities that friends, parents can play or share with their specific children?
I don't need this, do I? There are many activities that parents and children can do together. And of course, the default thing today in the 21st century is to get online and do things digitally and video games and television. And those are all options, certainly, as well. But I think the extent that we can do non-electrified activities together probably makes it more likely we'll be positively interacting. So more like old-fashioned games and picnics and things we do together in the home or in the community. Maybe we'll go to the store together. We have to do some grocery shopping, but let's turn it into a game, and maybe we make some lists and who can get this and that first or second, and that in itself could become a game. The child is learning some perhaps shopping skills, and as a result of that, you get to the end of the aisle and you've got the correct items, and you don't have any incorrect items. Maybe the child has had a chance to earn selecting some special treat.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim cevaplara göre.
Thank you.